After his divorce, the husband took revenge on his cheating wife after she tried to legitimize the affair. Lisa sat at the kitchen table, having just finished reviewing her speech for the upcoming presentation. She double-checked it for any obvious flaws, but in the 3 pages of notes, she not only outlined all the arguments, but also anticipated every counterargument and prepared a response. Ultimately, she concluded that with this speech she could not lose. Maybe she might not win, but she definitely could not lose. She pondered what she would have to lose, which put a smile on her face, but then she realized that taking that risk would be too risky. She was happy with the wording, so she turned her attention to the timing. If she proposed it slowly to Dave, it might resonate with him and get his approval, but it would also give him time to come up with counterarguments. Having known him for 18 years, she acknowledged that he might have the upper hand in a battle of logic, so she abandoned the slow approach. Her favorite tactic remained to catch him off guard, to be quick and secure his approval before he could gather his thoughts. His approval was crucial, damn it, without it nothing would get off the ground, and that was the risk-free side. Nervously, Lisa got up and started bustling around the kitchen, trying to distract herself from the inevitable pain she was about to inflict on her husband. He didn't deserve it, but she felt she had to do it to get what she deserved. She justified her actions by reminding herself that he had cornered her and left her with no choice, so it was his fault. Lisa scanned the kitchen, trying to remember the last time she had been here alone on a weekday. It must have been at least 6 months ago. Before that, she had always been the first one home to greet the children when they got back from school. What had caused the change? It was simple. John Steinhoff had been transferred from another office 7 months ago and become her boss. Initially, they maintained the typical dynamic between boss and employee. However, things changed. One day, he asked her to work overtime and then invited her to dinner as a gesture of gratitude. They discovered they had many common interests, and despite his being 8 years younger and single, their shared appreciation for arthouse films and fashion gradually deepened their bond. The compliments on her work and appearance also increased, which made her feel flattered but also worried that she was growing old. After work interactions became frequent, from work discussions to coffee or office gossip. Within a month they had abandoned all pretense of work and spent evenings together. No longer attending family dinners, she accompanied him to restaurants more often. By the 3rd month, their outings had expanded to include movies and shows, and many weekends, where she visited out-of-town or local attractions to justify her absence. She claimed that a promotion was imminent and that she wanted to stand out by working overtime. Although she felt guilty about it, her husband Dave wholeheartedly supported her newfound ambition, even though he knew it was wrong for a married woman. After 17 years of selflessly being a mother, she felt entitled to set aside a few hours for herself every day. When she was with John, she felt valued in a different way, and her husband constantly expressed his gratitude. Over the years, the increased workload had prompted Dave to take on more responsibility in managing the household. However, after repeatedly finding his children home alone, he became concerned about leaving his youngest son, 13, unattended. Lisa defended her actions and shouted at him, "If he doesn't feel comfortable, he can reduce his working hours." The next day, she woke up to find Dave already getting ready for work. That evening, she returned home to find him there helping the children with their homework and cooking dinner. With a slightly trembling voice, she thanked him for supporting her in her career, as her weekend work had begun. Dave once again took on the responsibility of caring for the children, not seeing it as a burden. He seemed to enjoy it and had found a new purpose in life. The children are delighted with their father, everyone is having a great time, even their 17-year-old son has sacrificed some time with his friends and is hanging out with his father and siblings. Until 3 months ago, Lisa's relationship with John had been strictly platonic. However, after a pleasant lunch and a flurry of compliments on a Saturday, John proposed booking a hotel room for the afternoon. At first she thought it was just a joke, but when she realized that John wasn't joking, Lisa disappeared, which deeply disturbed her. She hastily made excuses and laughed it off, but inwardly cursed John for using sex to destroy their friendship. She knows she would never betray her husband. The work week that follows is frustrating for Lisa, as John maintains an aloof professional attitude towards her. By the end of the week, she finds herself longing for his company. Despite her efforts to stay after work each day, the lack of meaningful interactions, lunches, and compliments weighs heavily on Lisa. She admits that recognition of her professional and feminine strengths is essential to her self-esteem, and while Dave is attentive and a good complimenter, it just doesn't have the same meaning. That week there were two incidents that should have shown Dave's obsession with Lisa. The first incident occurred on Wednesday when she returned home to find that dinner was only half prepared. Dave asked her to finish eating and then go pick up their eldest son from school. Lisa sat where she was, causing dinner to be delayed. This led to their first conflict. Dave questioned the value of her dedicated work, prompting Lisa to vent her pent-up frustration. From feeling neglected by John to Dave, she had calmed down before bed, denying there was any problem. When Dave asked if they were okay, however, Dave noticed her distracted demeanor and stopped pursuing intimacy. As Friday afternoon he was increasingly feeling rejected by her repeated refusals. John approaches Lisa and apologizes to her, attributing his behavior to the loneliness he feels when in close proximity to such a charming and desirable woman. Lisa accepted his apology, but made it clear that she was committed to her marriage and intended to remain faithful to her husband. In response, John asked her if she would be willing to help him relieve his frustration, a remark that triggered Lisa's possessiveness and she immediately rejected the idea. Despite this exchange, they parted amicably and Lisa agreed to meet him for lunch the next day at a performance. The second trigger of obsession occurred when Lisa returned home on Friday evening and found Dave and the children packing their bags to go camping. When she asked them about it, they explained that they had planned the long weekend trip a month ago. They looked at her incredulously when she claimed to have had no prior knowledge of it. They reminded her that they had discussed it at dinner all week, but she refused to believe them. Lisa insisted on changing it to the following weekend, but they refused, citing it as their last chance before winter. So the family set off on their trip without her. Lisa felt sad being left alone, and her only consolation was that their absence gave her 3 days to make peace with John. The next day, after the show, JN announces that he can't come on Sunday or Monday, and despite her attempts to contact the family, they are unreachable in an area without self-service. Lisa remains unsettled when the family returns, reluctant to blame them for not informing her of their whereabouts, fearing she may have missed their communication that evening. She rejects intimacy with John, citing the need to stay awake for work. When Dave hinted that her ambition was damaging her relationship with her family, an alarm went off in her mind. After the conversation, she started planning her week with John again. At 3 a.m., she woke up with a start, realizing the damage her words and actions had caused to her happy marriage and family. The thought of Dave leaving and leaving her to raise the children alone sent shivers down her spine. However, the thought of losing her considerate lover was even more painful. Determined to cool the affair, she snuggled closer to Dave and took his embrace, even though she longed to start making intimate contact as she had before. She restrained herself, however, as she considered his early morning schedule and subconsciously sensed that she needed to be intimate. That evening, when she returned home, Dave gave her a warm embrace, but Lisa, under the influence of John, was unable to fully return the affection. This set the tone for the next month. Within a week, everything returned to normal, as did John and her marriage and family, but this was the new normal. Lisa felt alienated when the four of them laughed, joked and interacted together, and failed to notice the countless concerned looks Dave shot her every night. Eventually, Dave could take no more and begged her to give up the promotion. He expressed his love for her and confessed his worries about the impact an increased workload would have on the family. Unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong day to confess his feelings. John tactfully but firmly stated that he would only agree to maintain their friendship if she agreed to develop it further. Lisa was deeply troubled. The thought of losing John's praise made her uneasy as Dave implored her to make a decision. It was clear that Dave would prevail if she had to choose between John and her husband. However, she desperately wanted to avoid making that choice, and she relied on both of them, one providing stability and the other satisfying her ego. Even after her husband's silence, Lisa used her remarkable intelligence to devise a risk-free solution before 2 a.m. The next evening, she explained the plan to John, emphasizing her firm commitment to her husband and her determination not to cheat. She described her plan to John, which was to seduce Dave into joining the threesome, with John acting as the convener. Elle became the third participant because the three men had never met. If the plan worked, she would find a way to spend some time alone with John, after which she would, with Dave's consent, avoid committing infidelity. But she reminds John that it will take time to convince Dave, and asks him to be patient. John hesitates, weighing up the months he has already invested in pursuing Lisa, and he is confident that once he has broken through the barrier he has set himself, Lisa will be ready to meet his needs. He agrees, and warns her that he will not wait indefinitely. Lisa thanks him for agreeing, and even allows him to kiss her properly for the first time. However, when he tries to touch her breast, she draws a line. Irritated by her own arousal, she pushed his hand away firmly, reaffirmed her commitment to fidelity, and they went on to have dinner. Lisa was not particularly worried about discussing a certain topic with Dave. Their relationship had always been marked by openness, especially when it came to their desires. Over the years, they had explored roleplay together many times, but that evening she felt too exhausted to broach the subject. The next evening, the timing still didn't seem right, so she waited until Dave fell asleep again before she started masturbating, indulging in fantasies about John. She couldn't help but moan. Her arousal suddenly intensified. Her private time was interrupted by Dave turning towards her. "That seems a bit unfair, doesn't it?" Dave said. "Why is there anything unfair about it?" Lisa asked, puzzled. "You've been lying there pleasuring yourself while you've been rejecting me for the past few months," Dave pointed out, and Lisa was shocked. She hadn't realized it had been that long. "Had it really been that long, dear?" she asked in disbelief. "Ever since you started chasing promotions, you've either been exhausted and irritable or simply rejected me, whenever I've wanted to make a suggestion." Dave explained that he felt a pang of guilt. Lisa saw this as an opportunity to finally talk about something she'd been keeping close to her heart. It took her a little while to explain to herself how her obsession with John had affected their marriage. She was ready to open up and find the right way to start this delicate conversation. However, she was so focused on her thoughts that she didn't notice Dave sigh and turn away again. She realized that proposing a threesome after 4 months of abstinence might hurt Dave's pride, suggesting that he could no longer satisfy her alone. No, it would be safer to make up with Dave first. She walked towards him and pulled him towards her, but as soon as he leaned back, he started to snore. Lisa felt so embarrassed that she didn't even dare to continue masturbating. She needed to release her pent-up desires before John entered her life. After 2 days of abstinence, there were no problems in her marriage or in her sex life. The next day, John seemed a bit. The next day, she had to kiss him again to prevent him from criticizing her. This time he showed restraint and made no move, but it made her so aroused that when she got home she kissed Dave passionately and even stroked his groin. Dave's eyes lit up, and without waiting for the children to go to bed, as soon as dinner was over they retreated to the small outdoor shed where Dave had installed the jacuzzi. This was their way of keeping a healthy sex life as their children grew up. Once inside, Dave eagerly began to make intimate contact, and when Lisa joked that he was impatient, Dave defended himself, explaining that he didn't want to give her a chance to change her mind. Dave performed as usual, but Lisa only climaxed when she closed her eyes and recalled the feel of John's bulge pressing against her leg earlier that afternoon. The next morning, Saturday, Dave woke her up the way she liked it, his tongue exploring her insides, while Dave probably thought she was using the pillow to muffle her moans. In fact, even with her eyes closed, Lisa tried hard to pretend that Dave was JN. That night, she felt confident enough to broach the sensitive subject with her husband. After praising his recent performance, she cautiously broached the subject. Although they had been together for many years, she admitted that things were beginning to become a bit routine. She was open-minded about threesomes with Dave, and his immediate response of role-playing exceeded Lee's expectations, so they would return to the jacuzzi after every meeting, collapse on the provided mattress, and be completely exhausted. In fact, the intimacy with Dave almost convinced Lisa to abandon her plans. After about a week and a half, she decided that Dave was settling in. John became increasingly impatient, and his compliments began to dwindle. Lisa found herself needing to kiss him almost every day just to keep him interested. Eventually, even that wasn't enough, and she sensed John pulling back again. After a long day and night in their jacuzzi, Lisa felt ready to discuss a sensitive topic with Dave. She had been gathering the courage to discuss their sexual adventures and her vision for the future, but before she could bring it up, Dave took the initiative and started the conversation. "Honey, the past few weeks have been amazing. I'm so excited that our guest has joined us in our intimacy. Have you ever thought about going through and she was intimate with you? Think this fit with our roleplay?" Dave asked hopefully. Lisa realized with shock that there was a major misunderstanding between them. "Do you think I want to have a threesome with another woman?" she responded, confused and surprised. Dave, too, felt confused and asked, "Isn't that what we've always wanted?" Lisa then realized that they had not clearly expressed their desires, which had led to this misunderstanding. "No, Dave, my idea was to include another man," Lisa clarified, realizing that this was now an honest conversation. Oh, Dave's response prompted Lisa to seize the opportunity to express her wishes more clearly. Honey, I've really been excited over the past few weeks about whether we'd have the chance to make my fantasy come true, with another man. Lisa made the suggestion, but Dave was nervous and carefully considered her proposal. Well, Lisa, to be honest, I don't think this would end well for us. I thought we both liked the idea of including another woman. The idea of another man makes me uncomfortable. He admits his discomfort, and it's clear, what if it's something I really care about? Dave, Lisa pressed, hoping he would come around to her point of view. Dave considered what she had said. I need time to think about it. The only way I can consider it is if we could invite another woman at a different time. He suggested trying to find a compromise. No, you don't have to talk to her, it can just be about me. Lisa offered to try to negotiate. I said no, Lisa, the idea of you with another woman makes me uneasy, let's drop it. It's out of the question. Dave firmly stated that this answered my question, we cannot include another man. Lisa realized the impasse in their conversation, the finality in Dave's tone indicated her hopes for this particular fantasy were dashed. The next day, when Lisa spoke with John about the conversation, he was clearly angry, accusing her of not trying hard enough, and then treated her coldly for the rest of the week. Frustrated and disappointed, Lisa has to deal with their failed negotiations and the resulting tension. On Monday, JN asks for a private conversation with Lisa. When everyone has left, he seems very sad because he can't continue to spend time with such a beautiful woman and she can't have sex with him. Lisa finds herself forced to choose between her husband and JN, and despite the pain it will cause her, she chooses her husband. John respects her decision, kisses her goodbye and asks her to always remember him. He understands that their relationship must revert to a professional one and starts to walk away. Wait, John stops and turns back. Just give me one more week, okay? What do you have in mind? Lisa asks. I'm not sure. Just give me one more week, Lisa says, so I can think of something else. They part, observing Lisa revert to her distracted state over the weekend. Dave ponders her recent mood swings and her fascination with the three newfound aspects. Now he has a new concern. Why had her lipstick smudged when she arrived home on Friday? It was time for some investigation, as there was plenty of time over the weekend to sort things out. Lisa eagerly sought out John after work on Monday, and his eyes lit up as she explained the plan. However, while discussing the plan, he interjected, John has raised a cautious note of caution. John warned Lisa to remember her bottom line, and she confidently replied, I'm willing to make some concessions, but I won't cross a clear bottom line either. We just have to see how things develop. How things develop. JN wants to make sure that things are clear and promises, honey, please remember that if he ultimately disagrees, then I will cancel our plans altogether. I understand, JN, and I'm prepared to accept it if that's the outcome. Lisa acknowledges that John has expressed understanding and has implied his approval by offering to be the practice partner if needed. Lisa spends most of Tuesday and Wednesday strategizing, and the basic premise she considers first and foremost is that whatever action she takes, it cannot jeopardize her marriage and family, which she compares to a poker game in which she has won a $1,000 bet and is unwilling to risk it. She wanted to keep it in a time deposit, safe and secure, even from herself. That way, she could keep playing, and even if she might win another $1,000, if she lost, she would still have her original stake. On Wednesday evening, John invited her to dinner for a full rehearsal. After the main course, he instructed her to go for broke. Okay, John, I've decided to go strong tomorrow night. Lisa began, first I'll express my deep love for him, emphasize how much I cherish our children, mention their future, like graduations, weddings, and grandkids' christenings, and then I'll bring up the retirement plan we discussed. Jay's thoughts began to wander. He noticed that women usually resorted directly to emotion, a tactic that might impress another woman, but often fell short of the mark. Men, on the other hand, tended to be more rational than emotional. Have you noticed? Lisa's voice interrupted his thoughts. Of course, Lisa, John replied, refocusing his attention, and then Lisa continued, I would remind him that I offered him the opportunity to participate in harmless fun, but he refused. I would tell him that he left me no choice but to seek affection elsewhere, starting with a Friday night date, before he fully understood. I will emphasize that it is purely physical and just emotionally enjoyable. JN apologizes and says that if he really loves me, he should allow me to do this. I estimate that I have about a 700 to 1 chance of getting him to agree on the spot. What do you think of this plan? JN privately estimates the probability to be much lower than this, but he doesn't say so. He thinks the probability of him seducing the older woman is less than 50%, but the thrill of the chase is worth it. He thinks he can enjoy a risk-free life once. However, multiple encounters would greatly increase the risk of being discovered and losing his job for having sex with a subordinate. Why take the risk more than once? He has been in a similar situation before and realizes that he has already experienced 90% of the fun, and by increasing Lisa's chances of success, he may get the remaining 10%. John mentioned that if he were Lisa's husband, he might suggest that they could maintain an open relationship, but Lisa was completely against the idea of sharing her husband with anyone else. She said that if her husband made such a suggestion, she would rather end the marriage than accept it. John Nicholson, JN, then suggested that Lisa find a way to prevent her husband from doing anything she didn't like. He talked about Lisa threatening to divorce him, and that if they did divorce, he might not see their children as often. But Lisa didn't like using that threat, even if it was just as a bluff. John tried to convince Lisa to defend herself, arguing that they were in trouble because her husband had not agreed to her suggestions in the first place. He took her hand, looked her in the eye and told her that after putting her family first for so many years, she deserved to find her own happiness. Lisa began to feel that John might be right, but she made it clear that everything depended on whether her husband Dave would agree to their plan. If she thought Dave would not agree, she would quit. John reassured Lisa that they couldn't afford to lose, although he doubted whether Lisa's hopes were realistic, as they were waiting for dessert. Lisa took some notes on her thoughts while they finished their meal. JN walked her to her car and they kissed goodnight. This moment ended their discussion about how to deal with the complex situation, as they focused on their personal desires and the boundaries they were willing or unwilling to cross. When John gently embraced her, she did not resist, but instead subtly moved closer to him. She could feel his reaction through his clothes, which almost overwhelmed her. For a moment, John considered taking things further, but decided it was best to keep their distance. "Okay, love, I'll book us a room for Friday night, at your place. I've never been there before," said JN with a hint of curiosity and excitement. "No," she replied with a smile, her tone distinctly playful. "It's too thin, you'll scream too much, I can assure you." Trembling, Lisa returned home, more distracted than usual. She realized she was alone and that everyone was already asleep. The next day she overslept and only just managed to get the children to school. She reminded them that she had arranged for Dave's parents to pick them up and for them to spend the night there. She checked that the children had all the necessary items with them. She scheduled a day off. She called John at least 5 times during the day to keep her courage up. She knew her Achilles heel was her inability to lie convincingly. When Dave gave her an ultimatum, he asked the obvious question: had she already found someone else? She practiced saying no in the mirror. She planned to go out for a walk and let herself be tempted. Any other question would trigger the kind of questioning she didn't like. She convinced herself that if she remained calm, collected and composed, she would succeed. So she sat down at the kitchen table and waited for her husband, who could appear at any moment. It was Thursday evening, and there were 24 hours to go before the long-awaited event. The children would be spending the night at their grandparents' house. Lisa was fully prepared, and kept repeating to herself, "Be firm, don't lose your nerve, I deserve this." Dave walked through the door at 5:30 p.m., an hour and a half later than his usual 4 p.m. He probably knew that Lisa was off work today and had therefore arranged his schedule in advance. He noticed Lisa sitting at the dining table with a bottle of wine that was 2/3 empty in front of her. He knew that she rarely drank more than 1 glass. Dave immediately realized the gravity of the situation. He was well aware that this was not just any special day, but also a time when Lisa might be more open and vulnerable. "Hey Lisa, what are we celebrating? Did you get a promotion?" Dave asked, trying to sound a mixture of curiosity and concern. "We're not celebrating, sweetheart, at least not yet. Please sit down, we need to talk." "Dave." Lisa responded, her tone serious, inviting the other person into a deeper conversation. Despite mustering her courage, Lisa was taken aback by her own nervousness. She found herself more anxious than expected. She silently repeated her mantra, "Be strong. Lisa, you can't fail, you deserve this." Dave spoke before she spoke up. "I assume this has something to do with your recent distractions, perhaps related to your virtual absence from family life for the past 6 months, or our 5 months of sexless bedroom antics, except for those 2 blissful weeks. Dave, I'm right, Lisa, you still love me deeply, you look forward to spending the future together, to seeing your children grow up and ultimately to enjoying a luxurious retirement. But despite all that, because I didn't agree to your secret threesome plan, you're now planning to take your lover, am I right? Is it tonight or tomorrow night? Dave paused, and an alarm went off in Lisa's head. He had just summarized the first half of the first page of her notes with astonishing accuracy. In a crisis, Dave's mental clarity exceeded hers, as he had proved twice before, when he had saved the children's lives while she had stood frozen, utterly terrified. She resumed her rehearsed speech, "But I deserve this, Dave, it's just physical, Dave, it's just making us panic emotionally." Lisa continued her speech, reciting a passage that John had suggested the night before, although she was not as familiar with it as the rest of the text. She warns Dave against sleeping with other women, or he will face divorce, loss of custody of his children and financial consequences. Lisa notices a change in Dave's expression, neither guilty nor resigned, but nervous and irritable. Lisa finds herself facing a problem with names. Dave insists on knowing the identity of the person involved, which indicates that the situation is very serious. Unprepared to face such a problem, Lisa hesitates before uttering John's name. Insisting that he is not the kind of person who would behave in this way, behavior. Dave's questioning intensifies, accusing Lisa of seeing John behind his back and using her recent behavior as evidence of infidelity, despite Lisa's protestations of innocence. Dave remains skeptical, questioning whether John has influenced her decisions and humiliated him personally. Lisa finds herself in a difficult situation, deeply insulted and frightened, as the discussion with Dave takes an unexpected turn. She is struggling to prove her fidelity to Dave, and she tries to explain that she is innocent of going out late at night and on weekends, just chatting and having dinner with John, but Dave doesn't believe her. He points to a specific example of Lisa coming home disheveled, suggesting that she is desperate for non-sexual contact. Raising her voice, Lisa tries to convince Dave of her innocence, insisting that she has not been unfaithful and that they have only talked, eaten and kissed. She implores Dave to believe that she would never betray their marriage. Overwhelmed by the situation, Dave covers his face with his hands and despairingly waves his hands. Lisa, who has never seen Dave cry, observes him closely and recognizes the signs of someone trying to hide emotional pain. She was horrified to realize that she might have caused Dave such deep hurt. The thought that she could lose everything because of a misunderstanding filled her with panic and disbelief, and she desperately tried to salvage the situation. Lisa recalled the last part of her prepared defense, which was often considered her ultimate escape strategy. She was prepared to abandon all plans with John and withdraw completely from the behavior that had led to the crisis, believing that such a concession would repair the damage. However, before she could propose this solution, Dave preempted her. Lisa's actions had irreparably damaged their marriage and family, and he expressed deep feelings of betrayal and grief, even accusing her of threatening to separate him from his children and causing financial losses. Lisa is further shocked and Dave's words take on a final tone as he walks out the door. She is momentarily stunned by the gravity of the situation, and when she gathers her courage to follow him, Dave is almost at his car. She doesn't get the chance to present her final solution. Approaching his car, she tries to assert her innocence, but Dave stops again without turning to face her. His response emphasizes the unforgivable nature of her actions in his eyes. He equates her leaving her family, lying about going to dinner with John, and kissing John with cheating, and his tone is full of resignation. Dave announces the end of their relationship, leaving Lisa to face her choices and the impact they have on their marriage. Lisa drops to her knees. On her knees, she is too shocked to support herself and watches her husband drive away, too shocked to cry. She couldn't help but recall the preparations for this confrontation. She had only thought about discussing the end of the marriage when issuing empty threats. She had never imagined that Dave would also consider ending the marriage. More than an hour later, Lisa indulged herself in self-pity. The realization that she might have irreparably damaged a wonderful relationship was difficult for her to face. So she put the matter behind her, but another worry lingered. For the first time, Dave's parting words and his demeanor rang alarm bells in her head. She worried about the effect her ultimatum had had on her husband. She feared he might hurt himself. Had she made it clear that he could lose custody of his children and most of his assets if the divorce went through? Did he consider hurting himself, knowing that ex-husbands had been denied visitation rights by a biased court system? Yes, damn it. Dave didn't answer the phone, so Lisa called her in-laws to ask if Dave was with them, but he had already left. They were confused, as Dave had only stopped by briefly and then left, hugging the 3 children. Lisa hurried to drive to every bar she could think of to look for his car, and she was so focused on this that she ran out of gas and had to call Dad for help. He realized her predicament and drove her home. She broke down and confided in her parents that Dave had left her. She witnessed the pain in her mother's eyes, and her father's words made it clear what he thought of his son-in-law. Eventually, her mother relented and agreed that Lisa would be better off going home, and she walked her to her car. Lisa arrived home and fell asleep on the sofa in the early morning. A nightmare woke her up at 7 a.m. Before she could shake off the sleep, panic set in. She frantically checked her phone for messages, but there were none. She called Dave's mobile, but it went straight to voicemail, as if it was switched off or out of battery. After all, his charger was sitting on the kitchen counter next to her. She called his workplace and was told that he hadn't shown up for work. She contacted the police and explained the reason for her husband's absence, but they were no help. It was 8 a.m. She contacted every friend in Dave's address book, but no one had seen him. She spent the whole day driving to all the places she could think of, and every few hours she went home to check Dave's car, but there was no sign of it, and his mobile phone was still not working. Suddenly, reality took a turn for the better, and she received a text message from John at 7:76 p.m. The text message sent a shiver down her spine, but she suppressed her reaction. Dave's parents had called to ask where he was, still having no idea of his whereabouts, and to ask about the children. Lisa asked them to look after the children for a while and went home. Lisa collapsed on the sofa, overcome with grief. She must have dozed off again, as she suddenly woke up at 3:30 a.m. She felt desperate and tried to imagine what Dave looked like, but failed. She felt an unreasonable certainty that he was dead. She feared she was losing her mind, but pushed that thought aside with dread. She returned to the car and found her phone, which she had forgotten on the passenger seat. There was 1 message from her oldest son and 6 from John. She listened to the message from her child expressing his thoughts about his mother, but ignored the others until around 10 a.m., when she searched the local potential suicide sites for Dave's car, bridges, ravines, secluded places, but found nothing. Desperate, Lisa contacted Dave's parents again, but they still had no news. She contacted all his friends again, and this time she called an old friend of Dave's who happened to be his former boss. She sensed that he wasn't being entirely frank and suspected something. She searched his address and decided to drive past his house to see if Dave's car was parked in the affluent neighborhood. She found the house, but no sign of Dave. As she drove away, her attention was caught by a distinctive-looking Lexus parked 3 houses away. The car belonged to JN and was parked outside another luxury home, along with several other cars. Suddenly, she thought of the first time she had met JN, a friend she had found attractive. She parked and approached the front door, hearing low voices inside that suggested a party would be held there on a Saturday afternoon. There was a panel embedded in the wall with a security keypad, doorbell and intercom button. She pressed the button and Lisa arrived at the company, where she was greeted by the managing director, Mr. Goldsmith. She asked to see John Stanhope, and noticing his car outside, Mr. Goldsmith recognized her and invited her in, but Lisa was disheveled, so she chose to wait outside. Mr. Goldsmith agreed to go and get John. John came out to meet Lisa, and after quickly making sure there was no one around, he embraced her, kissed her, and then held her tightly against the wall. Lisa was overcome with emotion and sought comfort in John's arms. John was eager to know what had happened the night before, and he urged Lisa to share her unpleasant encounter with Dave. Dave accused Lisa of infidelity and seemed to know about her plans with John, causing her to fear that Dave might do something drastic because of his disappearance. After that confrontation, their heated moment was suddenly interrupted by an angry woman, who accused John of betrayal and lamented their actions to avoid similar problems, implying that Lisa had a history of impulsive behavior. She intervened to prevent any potential harm, placing herself between John and the angry woman, who took Lisa as an easy target, turns and delivers a powerful backhand that knocks Lisa unexpectedly against the wall. She presses the intercom button and lets out a cry of pain. The angry woman continues her attack on John, while Lisa slumps to the ground. The situation escalates until the company boss intervenes. He gently but firmly stops John's wife and warns her against resorting to violence. After briefly handling the situation, the boss instructs John and Lisa to meet him in his office at 9 o'clock on Monday. He escorted John's wife back inside, while John was left in an emotional state. He rushed to his car and drove off, leaving Lisa, who was still struggling with her pain, feeling overwhelmed and distraught. Lisa eventually managed to pull herself together and, when she got home, she contacted her mother and persuaded her father to come and pick her up and take her home. Lisa cried all night and slept most of the next day, and didn't start crying again until Monday. Lisa's company's general manager discussed the situation with the human resources manager, and after hearing Lisa's, they also agreed not to fire John until his wife decided what to do. The boss knew that John's wife had gone to her mother's house with the baby. They decided to give Lisa until tomorrow to contact them before considering whether to terminate her contract. The human resources manager questioned whether they believed John's claim that he and Lisa had not had sex. To which the boss responded that it was still considered cheating, no matter how they bemoaned the complexity of the relationship. The HR manager was frustrated that people could not be satisfied with the status quo. It was not until Monday evening that Lisa felt well enough to call her in-laws to check on the children. She thought she could face the children now, but was afraid to face Dave's parents, worrying that her son might have died because of her. She planned to convince them to let the children come home without confronting her. When Dave's mother tells her that none of the 3 children will see her and threatens to call the police if she shows up at Lisa's, the phone suddenly hangs up before Lisa can react. Lisa wakes up to find herself lying on the kitchen floor, stiff and sore, disoriented. She is even more shocked to realize that she has wet herself. She takes a long shower and only then does she realize that it is already dark. She glanced at her phone and saw that it was already 6 p.m. on Tuesday. She had been unconscious for almost 24 hours. Although she felt fresher than a few days ago, Lisa was determined to take back control of her life. Despite the overwhelming feeling that Dave's death was possible, she pushed that thought aside and drew strength from her children. She decided to visit her in-laws without warning and bring the children home with her when she arrived at Dave's parents' house. She was surprised to find her parents' car parked there, and when she pulled up, they quickly came out the door to guide her back to their car. Lisa refused to demand to see her children. Her father told her that the children were not there and asked her to follow them home. Upon returning home, Lisa found her mother making tea in the kitchen and immediately asked about the children's whereabouts. Her father assured her that Dave was with the children and alive. Lisa then asked where Dave was, and her parents exchanged uncomfortable looks before admitting that Dave had taken the children to meet some people. Lisa's mother interrupted her impatiently, expressing disappointment and shame at Lisa's behavior, and believing Dave's version of events over Lisa's. Lisa felt ashamed and remained silent as her mother continued to mention meeting an old friend named Deborah Harris, which caused Lisa great concern. Lisa knew that Dave and Deborah had separated, and when she went to the business school far from home, the news that Deborah had recently divorced confirmed Lisa's fears. Her parents revealed that Deborah had seen Dave's state and brought him back home, where he had been living ever since. Furthermore, Lisa's parents told her that Dave had taken the children to meet Deborah and had taken Deborah's children to meet Dave to see if they got along. They assured Lisa that nothing had happened between Dave and Deborah before, but that they seemed to be getting along well now. Lisa was furious and insisted that Dave must give her a chance, but her parents related Dave's point of view, saying that he had been devastated by Lisa's lies about the overtime, while at the same time she was cheating on him with another man. Lisa's father emphasizes that infidelity involves not only physical intimacy, but also lying and engaging in intimate conversations with another man, pointing out situations that Dave found suspicious, such as Lisa's smeared lipstick and the detailed plan to manipulate his notes. Lisa protests that she didn't mean to threaten Dave, but her father expresses his disbelief and disappointment in her behavior, emphasizing the emotional damage they have caused Dave and the family. Lisa falls silent, staring at the table as she sees her parents both shaking their heads and radiating cold disapproval from them. She sensed Dave's feelings, the web of lies, the deception, the lack of respect and the emotional gulf that had grown between them over the past 6 months became clear. She realized that her marriage was beyond repair. Her parents gave her some time to digest it all before her mother spoke. "How will I and the children survive without Dave?" Lisa's voice carried concern. Her parents exchanged a somber look. Her father nodded to her mother, who took a deep breath before delivering Dave's message. "Lisa, Dave has been torn between the question of whether the children would be better off with you or with him for the past 5 days. However, due to the threats you made against him, he feels he cannot risk leaving the children with you. Her mother glanced at her father again, seeking his support. He gave her a reassuring squeeze of the hand. We have to be honest with you, Lisa. We share his concerns. Her father added, from our perspective, if we support we could lose custody of our only grandchild. Lisa was taken aback and needed a moment to digest their words. Frustration grew in her and she could not help expressing her disappointment. You're taking his side, she accused, feeling betrayed. Her father responded, you started this, Lisa, but Lisa did not back down. I will fight you all to the end. In custody battles, the courts tend to favor mothers. He can't prove that I cheated because I didn't cheat on Lisa. It's not about proving anything, her mother interjects. Dave just wants to end the marriage. The kids are old enough. Their preferences are important to the court. Let me tell you, if the court asks them tonight, you don't stand a chance. If I win, you'll probably lose custody. The gravity of her mother's words leaves Lisa in a quandary. She has to face the harsh reality. Her last bridge has been burned. Lisa runs to her car. And the two of them scream as they leave. Coda 2 weeks later, the court issues a temporary order in favor of Dave, citing his stable employment, close relationship with the children, having been the primary caregiver for 6 months, and stable living situation. In addition, the court takes the children's preferences into account and grants him visitation rights. The opposing party is at a disadvantage. Lisa has no job, no income, no housing, and is unable to pay the house's ransom. The judge confidently delivered his verdict after the mandatory 12-month separation period had ended. By the end of the period, the divorce was final. Lisa had regained her old self, her parents had forgiven her, and she was wholeheartedly devoted to being a dutiful mother. During the fortnights, she even agreed to attend the wake with Dave and his new fiancée after receiving the final divorce papers. Although she received a harshly worded email from John blaming her for his divorce and job loss, she blamed her own greed for the failure of the marriage. She realized that she was dissatisfied with her current life and was seeking more. The only problem that bothered her was recurring nightmares, which gradually decreased from once a night to once or twice a week. There was one particularly disturbing dream in which a choir was singing, "Stay firm, can't lose, I deserve this yet." She was relieved to find that she was now able to fall asleep more easily, and reminded herself that achieving one of the 4 goals was not actually that bad.